I was always a girl full of dreams, but it seemed like the universe loved testing me, and not in a fun way. Since I was little, my mother treated me like dead weight, something she had to carry but preferred to throw away. Love? Not even in a dream. Instead, she had fun throwing me in the mud with lines like, "You'll never be good enough." Sweet, right? When my father passed away, things went from bad to unbearable. My mother, always full of plans, for herself of course, found a millionaire to call her husband. Love? I doubt. It seemed more like an escape from poverty than anything else. He was an almost mythological figure in my life, while I was shoved into boarding school like a homeless package, alone, forgotten, learning the hard way what it's like to never be desired by someone who should love you. Until, one night, as I was trying to fall asleep, my cell phone vibrated. The voice on the other end was dry, blunt. My mother had died. "Your stepfather would like you to come to the funeral," they said. Ah, the stepfather. That man I barely knew existed, now seemed to be the central piece of a puzzle I didn't even want to put together. My head was a mess, but something deep inside me said, "Get ready, Liberty. Your life is about to turn upside down." When the plane landed, the world seemed frozen since that call. My mother, dead. The woman who never wanted me, who always looked at me as a nuisance, was now just a bitter memory and a shadow that I still had to face. From the airport, I went straight to the mansion where the wake would take place. And what a mansion. It was one of those things that makes you wonder, who lives in a place like that? Giant gates, impeccable gardens, everything screams wealth and power. But none of this prepared me for what was to come. Upon entering, it was impossible not to notice him, my stepfather, tall, impeccably dressed, in that tailored suit that seemed to hug every detail of his body. Gray hair that, instead of aging, made him even more irresistible. And the look, a mix of sadness, intensity, and something else. Something that made my stomach turn in a way that wasn't just nervous. "Liberty," he said, in that deep voice that seemed to pull me into another world as he held out his hand. For a second, it was as if all the weight of the universe had lifted. Being around him was disconcerting, that kind of discomfort that makes you want more. But hey, it was my mother's funeral. Nothing I was feeling made sense. Maybe it was tiredness, or maybe it was something I wasn't ready to admit. As guests arrived and murmurs filled the room, I felt out of place. Totally out of place. I didn't recognize almost anyone, and honestly, I didn't care. But my look? He seemed stuck in a magnet. My stepfather. He was the center of everything. Not just the attention, but the atmosphere. The people around revered him as if he was more than an ordinary man. And, to be honest, he really seemed to be. There was something about his manner, calm, confident, as if he held the reins even in the chaos of grief. Every move was calculated, and I couldn't stop noticing. But what really took me apart was how he looked at me. It wasn't pity. He wasn't curious like the other guests. It was something more intense, as if he could see every little part of me without me saying a single word. And that took me off my feet. "Are you well?" His voice sounded deep and warm as he approached, breaking my thoughts. He had a soft, almost careful smile. I could only shake my head. Words? I forgot how to use them. When he placed his hands on my shoulders, I felt heat spread through my body. "If you need anything, I'm here," he said, lowering his voice as if it were our own secret. And that's when everything changed. A shiver came over me, and I knew it was wrong to feel that way. It was strange, confusing, but at the same time, uncontrollable. My pain, which once seemed to consume me, was replaced by something else, something that I didn't understand, but that was growing inside me, without asking for permission, in Nye. The days that followed, my mind became a battlefield. The loss of my mother was there, of course, an emptiness that left me somewhat aimless, but along with that, there was him, my stepfather. He wasn't just a casual presence, he was in everything. In my field of vision, in my thoughts, even in my dreams. When the funeral was over, he called me to talk. I knew I should be focused on anything but him, but, well, it was impossible. He started straight away, without beating around the bush. "Liberty, I know this is all a lot for you. I want you to know you're not alone," I said, with a seriousness that seemed to pierce my soul. He paused, leaving the tension in the air. "I thought maybe it would be better for you to finish your studies here. I can help you stabilize." Stay close to him? The idea left me breathless. It was tempting, dangerously tempting, but also scary. Abandon everything, including my boyfriend? This was too big. Still, something about his voice, the way he looked at me, made my heart race. He made me feel safe in a way I had never experienced before. So, with my head full, I replied. I need to think. That night, as I stared at the ceiling of my room, the truth was already clear, even if I didn't have the courage to say it out loud. I would stay. Not only because of my studies, but because, in some inexplicable way, he had become the center of my world. It was like everything revolved around him now, and ignoring it seemed impossible. The days began to pass in a strange, almost suffocating way. Every corner of that mansion seemed charged with his presence. No matter where I was, it was as if the air smelled like him, as if the entire room was conspiring to remind me that he was there, so close, and yet so far away. I started to notice things that were previously overlooked. The sideways smile he gave whenever I entered the room. The way his eyes fixed on me, as if analyzing every detail of my face, my body. Even when he pretended to be busy, I knew he was watching me. But what really disarmed me was the intensity of those looks. They were not innocent. They were filled with something else. Something that made my skin burn. One night we were having dinner. The silence between us was so heavy that we could almost hear our thoughts. When I finally looked up, there he was, staring at me. Direct, intense, as if there was no one else in the world. You look different, he said, his voice low and filled with something I couldn't decipher. I laughed nervously, trying not to show the impact it had on me, but it was useless. He knew. The problem is that, more and more, I asked myself, did he feel the same way? Or was it just my head creating impossible fantasy? And worse, how far would it go? Because deep down, I already knew I wasn't in control of the situation. He was. Conversations began to change. At first, it was just casual. Comments. Nothing else. But little by little, he began to explore territories that left me disconcerted and dangerously attracted. Do you still talk to your boyfriend? He asked one day, as I was arranging some books in the library. His voice was calm, but there was something, a hidden teasing in every word. I answered yes, without paying much attention, but he didn't. Stop. And don't you think distance changes things? Sometimes we realize we want something different, something that's right in front of us. My laugh was nervous, an automatic reflex to disguise the chaos inside me. He knew exactly what he was doing. Every word, every look was a calculated provocation, a test. He was playing me, and to be honest, I didn't know how far it was going, or if I wanted it to stop. One night, while we were on the porch drinking coffee, he gave me that look. Intense, penetrating. It was already almost familiar, but it still made my stomach turn. You're so mature for your age, he said with calculated calm, as if every word was chosen to echo in my head. I knew I should change the subject, cut that atmosphere, but for some reason, I stayed there. Prey. Magnetized by the weight of that sentence. It was on a Friday that everything got out of control. He invited me to dinner. Nothing too elaborate, according to him. Just the two of us to relax a little. I knew I should refuse, but curiosity, or maybe something else, got the better of me. I chose a simple dress, but enough to feel confident. Maybe deep down, I wanted him to notice. And judging by the sparkle in his eyes when he saw me walk in, he noticed. In the dining room, he was waiting, holding a bottle of wine, with that smile that seemed more dangerous than inviting. I thought it would be a good icebreaker, he said, refilling my glass. We sat at the table, and the conversation started lightly, until he decided to break any barriers that still existed. Liberty, I want to be honest with you, he began, twirling the glass in his hands, his eyes fixed on me. I loved your mother, but lately I've been feeling something I can't ignore. My heart raced, and the words felt heavy in the air. He wasn't being subtle. I wasn't trying to hide it. He was direct, as if he knew I was already expecting it. I tried to change the subject, but he wouldn't let me. Haven't you ever thought about experiencing something different? Something that perhaps no one would understand, but that was just ours? The question came like a shot, full of meaning. I laughed nervously, a pathetic attempt to disguise the whirlwind inside me. But he knew. Oh, he knew. After that night, everything changed. There was no longer any need for words. Everything was in the gestures, the way he got closer than he should have, under the weight of the looks he was giving me, as if he wanted to pull me to a place where there was no return. One afternoon, while I was in the library, he showed up without warning, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Can I keep you company? His voice was low, hoarse. It was impossible to say no. He sat next to me, so close I could feel his warmth. The silence between us was dense, almost suffocating, but I didn't want it to end. He broke the silence in a way that completely disarmed me. I know this all might seem confusing to you, he said, his eyes fixed on mine, But haven't you ever thought about leaving what's expected behind and just following what you feel? Before I could respond, his hand lightly touched mine. It was an almost imperceptible touch, but it burned like fire on my skin. My heart felt like it was about to explode. The tension between us was at its limit. It was almost unbearable. I didn't know if I wanted to run away or give in for good, but deep down, I knew the truth. Resisting that desire that was growing inside me was becoming impossible. That night he invited me to dinner again. This time the atmosphere was different. There was an expectation in the air, something that made every second seem charged with meaning. He was more relaxed, but at the same time, he seemed completely focused on me. "You look stunning," he said as soon as he saw me. My face burned, and my heart raced with the impact of the compliment. At first, we talked about banalities, light topics, almost like a waiting game. But as the night progressed, he led me into deeper ground, more intimate. "Liberty," he said, his voice deep and full of emotion. "I can't hide how I feel about you anymore. It consumes me every day." My mind wanted to react, protest. But before I could say anything, he grabbed my hand, his fingers firm but gentle. "I know this feels wrong," he continued, looking straight into my eyes, "but I feel something for you that I can't ignore." There was a brutal honesty in that look, mixed with a desire that made me lose my ground. I should have walked away. My mind screamed at me to get out of there, but my body no longer obeyed. The heat rising between us was uncontrollable. Before I knew it, his hands were on my face, pulling me closer. Our lips met, and it was as if the entire world stopped. Nothing else mattered. Right, wrong, consequences. Everything disappeared. There was only him. There was only us. Every touch seemed to set my skin on fire. He had a way of getting to me that left me beside myself, as if he knew exactly how to drive me crazy. I couldn't resist anymore, and together we went to the bedroom. The entire night was a whirlwind, intensity, delivery, desire. It was something I had never felt in my life, as if finally, something inside me had been awakened. The next morning, the first rays of sunlight invaded the room, bathing everything in a soft light. I still felt my heart racing, but this time, it wasn't just from the adrenaline. Last night felt like a forbidden dream, something so intense and irresistible that it was hard to believe it had actually happened. When I left the room, he was already in the kitchen preparing coffee. The sight of him, so calm, so natural, disarmed me. When he saw me, he smiled in that way that made everything inside me melt. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm but full of meaning that needed no explanation. I sat at the table, still a little dazed, the words stuck in my throat. What had happened between us changed everything, and even if I tried, I knew there was no going back. "Liberty, I know you must be confused," he began, placing a cup of coffee in front of me, the heat of the liquid spiraling between us. "But nothing that happened was wrong for me. I want you to know that you're not alone in this." The firmness in his voice, the sincerity in every word. It was as if he had completely disarmed me. I wanted to respond, but my mind was in chaos. It was like being torn in half. On one side, the overwhelming desire to give myself to him. On the other, fear of the consequences that this choice would bring. And as he stared at me with that intense look that made my heart race and my skin crawl, I knew one thing: our story was far from over. As the days went by, something inside me began to change. I was no longer the insecure girl who had arrived at that house, full of doubts and looking for answers. I was discovering a new version of myself, a stronger version, more confident. It was as if the relationship we built had ignited something in me, a power I never knew I had. He was always there, by my side. Pay attention, gift. And more than that, he made me see things that I myself ignored. Our conversations were deep, loaded with meaning. He believed in me in a way no one had ever believed in me. "You have a special glow, Liberty. Never let anyone erase that," he said one night as we watched the sunset together on the porch. But this transformation did not come without a price. What we built was our secret, a world that only the two of us understood. Sometimes I wondered if I was ready to face everything that lay ahead, trials, challenges, maybe even regrets. But every time I looked at it, I knew what we had was real. And for the first time, I felt like I was in control of my life. The path ahead would be full of obstacles. That was obvious. But looking into his eyes, I understood that I was no longer alone, and that made every risk worth it, every decision. Now looking back, I see how much my life has changed since I walked into that house. I arrived lost, looking for love, acceptance, something that gave meaning to my existence. And what I found was much more complex, more dangerous, more true. My relationship with him transformed me in ways I could never have imagined. I learned that life is not a game of right or wrong, that sometimes we need to face our fears and question everything to discover who we really are, and that the most difficult choices are often the ones that make us grow. But most of all, I learned about myself, about the strength I have, about my limits, and about what really matters at the end of the day. The world can judge, always judge, but deep down, only we know the truth, and that's what really matters. If this story touched you in any way, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. I want to know, how far would you go to fight for what you believe to be true? Leave your opinion in the comments, and we'll see you in the next video.